what is actually going to perhaps disturb the entire balance that was trying to be constructed, and of course a new regional equation that was on its way to fruition at the G20 summit in Delhi could be derailed. But there is a game of misinformation, and there is a game that is very, very devious that's being played by those who have a very, very nefarious agenda. Let's start with what happened in the Gaza Strip and how a narrative of false propaganda now is losing steam as more and more proof comes in and more people realize what the truth was. It was US President Joe Biden on Wednesday, and on Thursday it was UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak who made solidarity visit to Israel. Both of them expressed their resounding support to the nation. Rishi Sunak held talks with Israeli leaders and is expected to visit other countries in the region. On arrival, he condemned the horrific act of terrorism by Hamas on the 7th of October and said that the UK stands with Israel. Also, the visit soon after the horrific explosion at the al-ahli hospital in Gaza. Ministry of Health in Gaza had claimed that hundreds of people were killed in that devastating explosion and blamed Israel for bombing civilians and children. But that narrative is slowly losing steam. It began with the Israeli Defense Forces on Wednesday giving proof of how this attack actually came from within Gaza itself via a rocket that was aimed at Israel, but that in fact landed there itself, and that explosion that was caused. And that's what caused the tragedy. A list of evidence was provided by Israel to back its claims. Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, the spokesperson of the IDF, said the IDF had intercepted terrorists talking about the rockets misfiring. They released the call to the public. He put forth aerial footage collected by a military drone which he claims showed a blast that he said was inconsistent with the Israeli weaponry or even a missile landing down. Where is the crater? That's the first question that comes to mind. IDF shared an image of what he claimed was radar footage captured by the military that showed the passage of a barrage of rockets fired from inside Gaza towards Israel, with the route passing over the site of the hospital. Then there were images which the IDF claims show where failed launches have taken place in Gaza. Nearly 450 rockets out of thousands fired from the Gaza Strip have actually landed in Gaza itself. That's Israel's claim. Israel also claims that there is aerial footage which shows that the explosion occurred in a hospital car parking after a rocket was fired from a nearby cemetery and the hospital itself was not hit. The US then independently did an investigation of its own to find the truth. Officials within US intelligence told CNN that the initial evidence gathered by them very clearly suggests that the hospital strike came from within Gaza and the rocket launched by the Palestinian Islamic Jihad group. Among the evidence is a blast analysis that suggests it was a ground explosion rather than an airstrike that hit the hospital. There was no singular crater suggesting there was a bomb, but there was extensive fire damage and scattered debris that is consistent with an explosion starting from the ground level, according to sources. That analysis is one data point that led intelligence officials to lean towards assessing that the attack on the hospital was a rocket launch gone wrong. Now, we've tried to decode what happened from the images of the aftermath that are now in public domain. What do we see? Burnt cars in what looks like a parking lot. That's what we see. Parts of neighboring buildings damaged. Then there is an explosion, crater in the courtyard near the hospital. Windows of nearby buildings are shattered. That's what happens. Then tiled roof of the nearby buildings are partially damaged. That's what we see in these images. But while the Hamas's propaganda seems to be unraveling, many around the world are actually silent. The very people who took to the streets to protest against Israel and for the cause of Palestine and its people are completely mum on Hamas and its atrocities. When the act has been committed from within, why the silence is a question. Hundreds of protesters stormed the US Capitol Hill, defying all police warnings and demanded ceasefire in Gaza. Dressed in black t-shirts, they held up large banners that read ceasefire and let Gaza live. Why aren't they saying this to the Hamas? There's a question. Are there those entities who are trying to deliberately blur the line between a terror outfit and the fight between two states or a cause, a larger political cause or a political story, ladies and gentlemen? That's a very important aspect. Hamas and Palestine issue are supposed to be two different aspects. This is a terrorist act. Their doctrine says, kill all Jews. Do you support something like that? Whereas the PLO says peaceful protests and a two-state solution. That's the Palestinian Liberation Army. There are two different narratives here. Danny Ireland Israeli diplomat and columnist joins us. Charlotte Littlewood, head of the UK India desk, ICFS, joins us, and Anand Ranganathan, author, stays on with us. Namaste. Thank you very, very much to the lady and the gentleman for joining us. Danny, this aspect of those who come out and have a go at Israel for causing damage in the Gaza Strip, why don't they ever question the Hamas? Because their rockets are killing innocents.
Well, it's a good question. Actually, what we see here today is not just a battle between truth and lies. It's a battle between life and death. And unfortunately, Hamas is part and parcel of the global jihadist movement, which for them, there's no coexistence, there is no peace, only their way, and their way is an Islamist world. First of all, they would like to take Israel and the entire Middle East. By the way, Israel is not only the only one on the crosshairs, it's also Egypt and Lebanon and Saudi Arabia, all those countries that today have moderate Sunni regimes. They are very much supported by Iran. The Ayatollahs of Iran, they are the mastermind. They have their proxies throughout the Middle East. We're talking about Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza. We're talking about Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, the militias, the Iranian militias in Syria and in Iraq, and also in the area of North Africa, like Libya, Sudan. They have the Boko Haram in Nigeria. They are all over. And for them, it's just the Nazis. They want to take over. It's a very tough jihadist war, and we are in the front line. But what the President of the United States and the Prime Minister of England and the Chancellor of Germany and many other leaders understood, and also millions of decent people around the world understood, that the line crosses in Gaza, but on the two sides of the lines, it's not Israel and the Hamas, or not Israel and the jihadists. It is I would say, the decent world, the Western democratic world on the one hand, and on the other hand, it's just brutal jihadist ISIS type with whom there is no coexistence. Now, who is behind all these jihadists? We have Iran, we said, but unfortunately, it's not just Iran. We have also two mighty powers that support them. And one of them is China, which is the main backer of Iran and its economy. And we have Russia, which helps them with military equipment and also with political cooperation. So today, it's almost resembles eerily World War II, when on the one hand we had the Nazis, and on the other hand we had the Allied forces led by the United States, also led by the United States today. And the United States understands that we just cannot let Hamas go on like the Nazis did without being totally surrendering. And the goal in Gaza is an unconditional surrender of Hamas, just like the world demanded, the decent world, the democratic world demanded unconditional surrender of the Nazis. And this is where we are today.
Charlotte Littlewood, how would you read this? I don't want to kill anybody, but I will not stop you from picking up the gun. Is this how terrorism is going to be normalized by people who are going to give this cover fire? Or is there a larger game to it? Because even closer home here in India, we've got the son-in-law of Nawaz Sharif coming out and saying, let's wage a similar jihad, and Pakistani nuclear arsenal is ready for those who want to, for the Palestine cause. And he's again raking up the name of a Salahuddin and then making this statement closer home. So you see how these narratives are then spun.
Yes, this is the really worrying trend we are seeing here. We're seeing a conflation of legitimate need for a solution for Palestine and Israel, hopefully a two-state solution, being overridden, taken over by those that are pushing anti-Semitism and also supporting Hamas. It is besmirching the Palestinian cause, and it is creating what may be irretrievable in the next few years for those that are advocating for Palestine and wanting some kind of solution in the future for peace for both sides. So it is really worrying, especially for liberal-minded people in the West, those that want humanity to survive here, to see these legitimate causes overridden with such hate, extremism, and indeed even support of terrorism. What needs to happen here is an absolute eradication of Hamas. I support Biden in supporting Israel's military to this end, and Biden for giving aid support to Gaza. Both of these things are both needed and are both true and are both realities at the same time. And I think what's being lost here is the ability to hold one truth, that Jewish people need a homeland. This has been proven time and time again, and we have just seen what I would consider another attempted Holocaust. So that has never been truer and more real for us as now. And it's also true that Palestinian people living in the West Bank in particular, which is where I've spent 2 years living, I know that area very well, need to have greater freedoms and a state, I would say. And these two things can be held together at the same time. And this is what we now need to move towards. And we can see where those are being extreme and those are supporting terrorism, and countries need to crack down on that. I absolutely believe that we should be treating those who are supporting Hamas in the UK like we treated those who supported ISIS.
But wouldn't you say that those who are lambasting IDF and Israel for attacking the Gaza Strip should have first lambasted and distanced themselves from the Hamas? Because that's not happened, Charlotte. That's not happened anywhere. None of the Arab nations have outrightly condemned Hamas. They were all quiet. There was a deathly quiet on the 6th, 7th, 8th and 9th of October. There was a deathly quiet. There was an attempt to try and even change the entire aspect of 40 babies being slaughtered or babies being slaughtered. Let's not put a number. Women being raped and then killed. Young children being taken away as hostages and also being brutalized. All of that was not even spoken about. Nobody came out and condemned it. And this happens, this incident happens, and everybody makes a big show and song and dance, even before realizing that it was a Hamas rocket that's landed near a hospital and caused that explosion that perhaps caused the death of so many innocents. How can the Palestinian establishment there claim this number without giving a shred of evidence about this number? Any life lost of an innocent is wrong, either side. Because they are not in the war. They are caught in the crossfire.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. You know, any life lost is absolutely awful. But what we're seeing is a support for Hamas and a silence for Jewish victims. And we saw that before Israel had even begun to have a counterstrike against Hamas for what happened on October the 7th. We saw those coming out and crying, Free Palestine. And I think that really shows us the heart of the movement right now, which is one of deep anti-Semitism. That doesn't mean to say that there isn't legitimate support for Palestinian freedom, but unfortunately the activists that we've seen in the West have not been advocating such.
Anand Ranganathan?
Hanand, you know, I'd like to make a few points, and I think they need to be internalized because these are irrefutable facts, not opinions. And I'm afraid for the last almost a fortnight, people are going more by opinions than by facts. So here goes. Number one, by most authoritative accounts, and you've illustrated a few, it is now absolutely clear that this Baptist hospital in Gaza was not bombed in an accidental Israeli airstrike, but rather got damaged in a very limited way through a Hamas stray rocket. But here is the thing. The Baptist hospital in Gaza was safe and functioning well till October 6, was it not? And it would have continued to be safe and function well. Beyond that, had Hamas not murdered 1,400 innocent Jews on October 7th and brought this war upon itself. So let me be clear and unequivocal. Hamas alone is responsible for the hospital tragedy. Number two, the Jews were in the land of Israel more than 1,000 years before Islam was even born. So this argument, Anand, that the land does not belong to Jews is totally wrong. King David founded his kingdom 1,700 years before Islam. And what is symbolized in the Israeli flag? The Star of David. The Jews were driven out of Israel 500 years before Islam, after the defeat of Simon Bar Kokhba in the Jewish-Roman War. So they have a legitimate right to that land. Number three, while the Israeli Declaration of Independence in 1948 absolutely does not discriminate between Jews and non-Jews, i.e. Muslims, or any other person of any other religious denomination, the Charter of Hamas, democratically elected by the Palestinians, proclaims that the day of judgment will not come until Muslims fight Jews and kill them all. Israel will continue to exist until Islam obliterates it, just as it has obliterated others before it, unquote. Number 4, Israel has voluntarily, Anand, given up the land, Sinai, West Bank, Gaza, that it had taken over after the Arab-Israeli wars. If it was the perennial aggressor, why would it have done so? Number 5, Israel believes in the two-state solution, where Israel and Palestine can live peacefully side by side. You go by all the Oslo and other declarations, and this is absolutely emphatic. Hamas does not believe in two-state solution. Number 6, Egypt has demolished thousands of Gazan homes along the Sinai border. Egypt has flushed out Gazan border tunnel, not Israel, Egypt. And besides, can you please tell me why are Egypt and Jordan not allowing Palestinian refugees to enter their land right now?
Exactly.
Especially when the Rafah border crossing allows for civilians, not goods, to cross over. And finally, just 30 seconds. Have you ever wondered why a small sliver of land surrounded by the richest, the wealthiest nations in the world, the Arab states, trillionaires, billionaires, remains the poorest when the same nations have converted deserts into Dubai? And yet, Gaza remains like Gaza, poorest, filthiest, sickest, most dangerous place in the world. I'll tell you why. Because they want to keep playing the victim card. Just like after they start the violence, kill Jews, they march down their dead, killed in retaliatory Israeli action to show the world that Israel is the oppressor. They project Gaza as an open-air prison and gutter because they say Israel has made it so. The fact is, they care more about denigrating and embarrassing Israel than about developing Palestine. That's the naked truth.
Well, a lot of facts that have been put out, and at the end of the day, Prime Minister Narendra Modi unequivocal in his support, unconditional support to Israel, but very clearly saying that, yes, the heart goes out to the Palestinian people who are sandwiched in this fight against terror. And innocents too, on both sides. Very clearly, the fight is against terrorism. It's Israel versus Hamas, not an Israel versus Palestine situation. That line should not be blurred. We've got to be very clear there.